This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and an honor to have with us. As always, we try to observe this holiday differently from some others, and some have criticized me that for over the years, but I just can't get away from the reality of this so-called holiday. For the Indigenous people, it is a National Day of Mourning. What we've not had the privilege of doing over the years yet, and I'm fortunate to have found them, is an organization that represents Indigenous people in the place where the fairy tale allegedly happened, in Massachusetts. And we want to hear all about it. I know as people have their family celebrations, no one's against family. But even as you do that, try your best to remember those families that were separated, in fact, that were slaughtered hundreds of years ago in a false story that started this whole so-called holiday. Again, the Indigenous people call it National Day of Mourning. I've always liked to call it also Thanks-taking, because that's what it was. It was a taking. And so we are happy to have with us from the North American Indian Center in Boston. He's a director there. He's also a member of the United American Indians of New England. Jean-Luc Pierite joins us here on Make It Plain. Thank you for joining us, brother.
Thank you, Reverend, for having me.
It's an honor indeed. So talk to us about what you all do normally on this Thursday, and how you recognize the National Day of Mourning.
Yes, so this is going to be the 52nd annual National Day of Mourning. We have a rally on Coles Hill in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which overlooks Plymouth Rock. From that point, we march all the way around Plymouth, Massachusetts, through the town square, past the memorial marker to Paul Metacomet, the Wampanoag chief who led a war of resistance almost 346 years ago this year. And then, of course, we end up at Plymouth Rock. And what we do is we have Indigenous peoples from all across the Americas come out and speak their truth on that day, on this day. So we're very happy to have once again another very powerful observance, especially at this critical time for all of us.
Indeed, indeed. So I know that we're not supposed to be teaching critical race theory these days, or history, period. But Jean-Luc, talk to our audience, if you would, please, a little bit about the real history of what happened. We rarely get a full picture of it, but from your perspective and your organization's perspective, talk to us about what really happened in Plymouth.
Yes, Reverend, and it's not just about what happened, but is what's happening. From the moment that the Pilgrims landed, actually there was already a slave trade that was affecting North America. Indigenous peoples were sent back to Europe and sold at 220 shillings a piece into slavery. And also there were many of our cultural resources, our natural resources, that were extracted from the peoples. And so what's critical about recognizing this day is not just talking about all of the things that were done to the Indigenous peoples, but how that actually ties back to the impacts that our community faces today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sold, captured, enslaved. But then at a point, they arrived in Plymouth. And we're in the midst of a pandemic now. One of the things they did was bring their own diseases with them, didn't they?
Yes, they did. And it's, that A lot of the history that gets taught about what happened here in New England, it actually places epidemics and pandemics before contact, which sort of like helps to wash the hands of the colonizers who did bring those diseases to these shores in a form of biological warfare. This is something that has happened at all points of contact. For my own tribe specifically, we are the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, and we were first contacted by the Spanish in 1541. So it's very critical to actually talk about like all of these points of contact, not just about the Pilgrims in 1620, but also Christopher Columbus in 1492, Hernando de Soto in 1541. All of these points of harm that has happened to us.
Yeah. The tribe or the group of indigenous people in the Massachusetts area that had that contact, am I correct? The Wampanoag, am I pronouncing that correctly? Is that accurate?
That's correct. And, last year we actually, there was an observance of the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower. And I just want to be very clear that there's nothing remarkable about people sailing a ship across the Atlantic and landing on these shores. What is actually a little bit more remarkable is that 400 years ago this year, in 1621, there was the signing of the first treaty between Massasoit and those pilgrims, which started the government-to-government relationship between the indigenous peoples and what would become the nation state of the United States. And so another message that we're trying to get across this National Day of Mourning is that it is an obligation to these nation states, it's an obligation to the United States to honor the rights of indigenous peoples and honor the treaties.
And Massasoit was the tribal leader, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, according to Philip Deloria, a native scholar, Massasoit is actually a title. The actual name of the chief is Amsamiquin. And so we actually have to kind of we have to when we're talking about history, when we're talking about people's identities, we have to kind of celebrate and uplift all of who we are.
Right. And folks, for those of you who have a little trouble getting it at home, I hope you heard that title, Massasoit. Where do you think the name Massachusetts came from? Right? I mean, so we have to keep a lot of these folks, look around you. A lot of the geographical locations in which we live in this country have indigenous names and indigenous references. Don't forget that.
That's correct. That's correct. And I just wanted to kind of uplift that while history for us, we're very rarely, recognized for the people that we are, the names that we've had historically. The names of places do remain intact because those were sort of like the key targets. Those were the things that, we're going to make sure that those identities remain intact because that's what's of value to the colonizers here. And as far as the name Massachusetts, we do have in North American Indian Center, Boston, we are on the traditional indigenous territory of the Massachusetts Nation, who continue to this day in part through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. Back in 1861, we had 16 tribes within the borders of Massachusetts. And to this day, they've actually, by the federal government, they've been diminished to 2 recognized tribes. However, all of those people, all of their living descendants, still continue to this day, regardless of recognition status by the federal government.
More MIP after this message. And when you say continue to this day, talk to us a little bit about the status of these tribes, I guess socioeconomically and otherwise, because we know that there's still a great level of discrimination going on. How are some of these tribes doing, and yours even for that matter, since you mentioned Louisiana? I mean, are people thriving or what?
Yeah, and especially in Louisiana. I mean, it's something that is kind of a nationwide issue, is that many of our tribes that are state or non-recognized are on coastal areas, and they are mostly impacted by climate change. and yet the accessibility of resources to recover are not so much because of that lack of federal recognition status. And then when you come here to Massachusetts, all of the decisions that get made about public lands, about private development, it was very rare that tribes actually get full consultation. And that's one thing that we're trying to push for among tribal governments, among NACOP, among UAIN. You know, we need to make sure that there is free, prior, and informed consent from all Indigenous nations, regardless of what happens within the borders of the United States.
Yeah, no, that's important, and that those tribes have resources. I can imagine. We did talk about the pandemic, but I mean, even issues of health and healthcare, those are of great import, aren't they?
Yes, and it actually was kind of it was a really hard fought battle for North American Indian Center Boston because from the beginning of the pandemic up until December 30th of last year, American Indians, Alaska Natives were not disaggregated within the data. We were actually placed within an other category. And so that actually led us to have a lack of quantitative data. We had the qualitative data. We had the stories from the families that were coming into the center and telling us the disproportionate impacts. But when it came time to actually go to funders and state agencies who should have been keeping track of everybody, we lacked that quantitative data. So it has been a hard-fought battle to get natives counted within pandemic. But I will also add that we did a very intensive push for the census. And so when you talk about American Indians, Alaska Natives, mixed with one or more races, here within Massachusetts, formerly we were at 35 to 50,000. Now, as of the 2020 census, we are at 94,000 strong. So American Indians across the United States have actually seen a population increase of over 80%. So we're very proud of that. So it's not all gloom and doom, but we do need to have an affirmation of our traditional knowledge so that we can combat all of what is affecting the world today.
And speaking of that, I've had Native guests on the show over the years, and several years ago, a few of them educated me. At least this group did. They never really liked the word genocide because y'all still here, and it kind of gives a notion that there aren't any more left. But as you just reported to us, the population is actually growing.
That's correct. I mean, we always have to fight back against historicizing of our peoples. You know, as I said, it's not what happened to us; it is what is happening to us. But it is also about how our existence is our resistance. It is about the resilience of our communities. And it's about every way that we are able to grow and thrive, not just survive.
Indeed, is the Biden administration provided any hope in terms of the indigenous population in this country? I know Deb Haaland is in administration, and I know
It's
she's
a
very welcome. Are they making a difference?
it's a mixed bag. You know, we do have Secretary Deb Haaland as our first Native woman Secretary of the Interior. We do have on the federal level a recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day. But even with that victory, he actually observed it alongside Christopher Columbus Day, which is sort of anathema to what we're actually putting out there. We actually want to uplift the true history of these lands and not just continue to perpetuate all of this mythology that comes with Christopher Columbus Day. And also, after coming back from COP26, our President Biden actually auctioned off, scheduled the auction of over 80 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico, not just affecting my own homelands back home in Louisiana, but those superstorms actually will be able to carve a path through the United States and affect the Northeast, the Midwest, and so forth. So this is devastating consequences, not just for Indigenous peoples, but for all people. So we're trying to push President Biden to do better.
More MIP after this message. Help my audience too, because it's always important for people to be enlightened in terms of how you should be referred to. Now, you're the director of North American Indian Center. You're part of the United American Indians of New England. Some have been made to believe that Indian, that term is pejorative. But talk to us about that. Enlighten us, because I know people are going to ask me now, well, Mark, should we still say Indian or American Indian or Native American or Indigenous? As you notice, I often like to say Indigenous, but enlighten us as to the proper and the most respectful form of reference.
Yeah, and Indian is actually something that is codified within federal law, whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Canada. We call ourselves, my organization has called itself the North American Indian Center of Boston, because we provide services not just for American Indians within the United States, but those First Nations peoples from Canada that come down under Jay's Treaty to live and work here in Massachusetts. Internationally, we have a set of people known as Indigenous. And that doesn't just mean Native Americans or even Indigenous peoples to the Americas. We're talking about the Maori. We're talking about Indigenous peoples in Indonesia. Even Norway has the Sami. But in each of these cases, you have peoples who have claims to land that and are in constant conflict with those nation states, such as the United States. So when it comes down to it, as far as like personal identification, we always kind of emphasize that it's about relationships. You should, of course, you know me as Jean-Luc Pierite, but then when you get deeper into the weeds about, who are your people, where are you from, I can tell you, I'm a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. That is my Indigenous nationality. So I can, definitely say that it's always preferable to form those relationships and refer to people by their own tribes.
Yeah, that is ideal. Thank you for that. I did a show a little over a month ago when it was big news about the enormous number of Native American women who are missing or murdered. I'm sure that's something that is of great concern to you as well. Is there any new information or updated information about how that crisis is being handled?
Well, we do need a reinstatement of the Violence Against Women Act to help to reaffirm the jurisdiction of tribal governments' court systems, because we do have people that are going on tribal lands and causing harm to our women. Also, we need to stop all of these extractive pipelines, because with the pipelines come the man camps, and there are more cases of missing, murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people. Again, we get into this issue where we have a lot of qualitative data, but when it comes to the reports from our governments and what is actually happening with our community, we still have the issue of like underreporting or not reporting at all. Definitely we have a lot of headway to make.
And as we observe in our experience as African Americans, the disproportionate amount of contact with police and police violence, that happens in your community as well, doesn't it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, March 5th of last year was the 250th anniversary of the murder of Crispus Attucks. He was a Black and Indigenous man, commonly known as one of the first casualties in the American Revolution. We got together with Black organizations here in Boston, namely New Democracy Coalition, to form an observance of that and to mark all of the community members that we had lost over the previous year. Little did we know that we would again, have that resurgence after the murder of George Floyd. Yeah. And so it's a constant issue.
Yeah. Lastly, as people are spending this day in whatever way they choose, many obviously with family. I always appeal to people to think about all of our families, including our Native American Indian families. But in your own words, as we close, what would you ask of people on this National Day of Mourning, Brother Jean-Luc? What would you ask them to do specifically? How can they do whatever they plan to do with their families, but at the same time observe the National Day of Mourning?
You know, a lot of it is about being thankful for the blessings that we have, and of course, as you know, fellow humans, that's undeniable. But when it comes to actually talking about having a deeper dive into the impacts and what does it mean for Native Americans to have this National Day of Mourning, there's also a time for reflection for our allies, for our non-Indigenous peoples, to actually understand how they benefit off of systems of colonialism and white supremacy. And so, yes, be thankful, but also understand that the privilege, the benefits that come all of with all of those blessings that we're thankful for, someone has had to pay for that.
Yeah.
And it has always been Black and Indigenous peoples who have paid with their lives, their labor, their land, and their natural resources.
Indeed. We are very thankful to have you with us, my brother. Again, folks, he is the director of the North American Indian Center of Boston, also a part of the United American Indians of New England. Jean-Luc Pierite, brother, I pray that this National Day of Mourning is as spiritual and as meaningful as it always has been. 52 years, folks. And I pray that all of us keep in mind that it is not just a Thanksgiving celebration for those of us who do that with our families and eat the turkey and all of that. Let's deal with the real history, folks, and let's observe this National Day of Mourning in the way that Brother Jean-Luc has asked us to. My brother, thank you, okay?
Tikash, Reverend. Thank you for having me on.
All right, thank you. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.